Hey everybody, how's it going today? Well, the wait is over. Dominaria United has been revealed. As of the recording of this video, the full Dominaria United set list has been spoiled, and so now it's time to check out the set and do a set review. So today I'm starting with the white cards, and this is the first video in a series of 8 that covers all the colors, artifacts, and lands for the set, also including multicolor. But what I'll be covering today is the white cards, and we'll be going through it by rarity, common, uncommon, rare, and then mythic. The way I'll do the set review is a little different than what you might see with some of the other content creators. Instead of going on a grading scale, I actually am going to do it a little simpler, and I'll be doing it for both limited and constructed. But pretty much the way my scale will work will be one for each category, limited or constructed, and those are using the ratings of low, which would be for cards that are just, kind of fillers, or unplayable cards, or cards that might fit a specific theme, but overall you wouldn't see in every deck. Then we have the mid-range, which is where most of the cards will probably be for limited, and some for constructed as well. Cards that can be interchanged pretty easily, but also can be replaced as well with other cards. But when they're your only option, you're happy to have them in your deck. Next are the high rating, which are cards you really want to have in your deck, cards you enjoy having, stuff that helps bring your deck together, stuff that's highlight for your deck, and this is also good cards that will help you with achieving your objective for what your deck's trying to do, and that's both for limited and constructed as well. And then the last category is epic. You can see that this kind of mirrors the rarity structure, but I found it fits ratings as well. And epic are cards that just are bombs, stuff that takes over the game, stuff that when you draw it, you love to have it, and things that are going to be able to help sculpt the way the game is going to go for the rest of the way for you. And so you're going to see a lot of great cards in this category, stuff that like are mythics, that change the shape of the game. Give you a good example of that, something like Meathook Massacre from Midnight Hunt, or even maybe a rare card like Invoke Despair from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, or Wandering Emperor. That's another great example. That's a card that if you're not prepared for it, you can walk right into that card, and it can remove your best creature from the game. So those are good examples of epic level cards. So we'll go ahead and get started here. We'll be going through. I'll cover limited first, and then constructed. And pretty much limited covers cards you would play in sealed deck, draft, or cube draft. And then constructed, mainly for constructed decks like standard decks, explorer, and also commander. But so there's a wide range. But one thing to note is that these reviews are just my assessment of the cards. They aren't the definitive answer of how good the card is. There's going to be other streamers and content creators that have different opinions, which is totally understandable, because everybody has will see cards in a different light and in a different way. One person might see them in something that the card does that another doesn't. So only as the format develops and we get a chance to revisit the cards will we really know the true power and true effectiveness of each of the cards. But like I said, these are my initial assessments, and I do play a lot of limited, even though I've only done gameplay for constructed videos. But I like doing both, so limited and constructed. So let's go kick it off, and we'll start with the limited for the card, and then also I'll do constructed for the card in that order. So First up, we have our Argivian Cavalier. It's a common creature, 2 and a white. It's a 2/2 creature orc knight, and it has the enlist ability. That's a new mechanic for Dominaria United, and so I'll go ahead and read what enlist does. It's as this creature attacks, you may tap a non-attacking creature you control without summoning sickness. When you do, add its power to this creature's until end of turn. And then whenever Argivian Cavalier enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Interesting card. After seeing what enlist does, it's going to really be hard to say what kind of impact enlist will have on limited play and constructed. I can see it going in multiple directions, where it can be a benefit for your attacking force, or also it could be a liability if you're caught, without any way to protect that single creature that has been pumped up with all the enlist creatures. So it's definitely something we'll have to keep an eye on and see how it plays out in the coming weeks. But overall, I think this card's fairly decent for limited. It's got a 3 power, 3 toughness if you combine the creature and the Cavalier together, or I'm sorry, the creature token and Cavalier together. So I think I would probably give it a mid rating for limited, and just due to the fact that it's definitely a creature you would, if you get it in a sealed deck or you're drafting, getting a few of these in your deck can help you develop your board state. Probably on the lower end of the mid range, but still decent to have for a draft or sealed deck. For constructed though, I think I'd probably give this a low rating just due to the fact it's in constructed. The threshold for cards that are highly efficient is pretty high, so you need to be able to get the best cards in your deck without really carrying any kind of fat with your deck. Now, I just don't think this card makes the cut for constructed. It might for certain tribal decks, like knight decks or an orc deck, or a token deck that helps you create your tokens. But I think overall, I'll probably just give this give it a low grade for constructed, but mid for limited. Let's move on to Argivian Phalanx. Another common, Argivian Phalanx, 5 and a white. It's a creature, human core soldier with 4/4 power and toughness. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control, and vigilance. Not a bad card. I think it's got some potential if you're playing a creature heavy deck in limited. Although you got to be careful if you're curving out and a lot of your creatures have been killed. This could actually end up coming on into the battlefield as the only creature where you have to pay full price. So it could be situational, but the fact that it does have vigilance, that's pretty strong. So you really don't have to attack or tap to attack with it. So decent card, but still unsure. I think I really need to see this in battle to know how it's really going to do. My gut tells me to give it a low for limited, but still could be see how it goes. It could be a good topper and maybe work itself into the mid range, but it's hard to say. Got to see it in action first. That being said, I think also for constructed, I would give it a low rating. Just due to the fact that it's unless it's highly specialized your deck, building around a lot of tokens, or some kind of tribal deck, it's going to be somewhat limited. But it serves its purpose as a body, but there are other alternatives that are probably better for the 6 mana slot, or even at a discounted slot for since it does get a discount with the number of creatures you control. So, but overall, serviceable, but not quite hitting that full cut yet for me. We'll have to see. But we'll move on to the next one here. They have Artillery Blast. Pretty interesting here. Artillery Blast, 1 colorless and a white. It's an instant domain. Artillery Blast deals X damage to target tapped creature, where X is 1, plus the number of basic land types among lands you control. At first glance, this might not seem that great, but actually, with the way this Dominaria United set is constructed and the way it's set up, I have a feeling this card could be fairly decent. It's going to have some good removal as far as effectiveness in the format. I could maybe as a low end constructed card, but for limited, I think it's pretty good. You're going to be able to have it deal damage probably at least for, I'm willing to bet 2, most of the time probably 3, but if you're building a domain deck, you'll easily be able to hit 5 damage with this to a tapped creature. So I really like this card. The fact that it's instant speed, it's only 1 and a white, and with the fixing and the way some of the domain options are available for this card, I think it can be pretty good. So I'm going to give it a mid rating. I like it for limited. Fairly decent. Moving on to constructed for it, I have to say that there are better removal spells in the 2 mana slot for constructed. However, for commander, I could see this being pretty decent. Gosh, it's hard to say. There's just so many good removal spells in constructed and commander, but the only way to know is to see it in action. So I think for constructed though, just due to the fact that there are other cards available that kind of outshine this, I'm going to go ahead and just give it a low rating. But still, it's something if you're playing, it might be something you want to use at some point. Who knows? You might be able to find a slot for it in your commander deck or constructed deck. So we'll have to see how that goes. So the next card is Benelish Faithbonder. It's a creature, 1 for 1 white, power and toughness. It's a 1/3, has vigilance and enlist. Oh, I'm sorry, and it also has vigilance. So not bad. If you enlist a bunch of creatures onto it and it has vigilance, it'll be able to block later on. It's too bad you can't use enlist as when you're blocking. That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, it's not bad. I think it's a body for the set, for the deck, and something you could probably use. But if there's probably other alternatives that are better, you probably want to slot them in. But it's definitely something that you could use in your limited deck. So probably put it on the low end of the spectrum, but we'll have to see how it plays out. Like I said, it's hard to say with this how a list is going to do. I have a feeling it's going to be a situational type ability. For constructed, I would definitely give this a low rating, just due to the fact that it's kind of limited with what it does. And in constructed, your slots are premium slots that you want to get your best cards in there. So I just don't see it making it into a deck unless you're playing some kind of human tribal deck, and this is one of your only options. So I think that's where I'll go with this for constructed. So next up is Benelish Sleeper. It's a creature, Phyrexian human soldier, 1 and 1 white. It's a 3/1, has kicker black. For those of you who aren't familiar with kicker is an additional cost you can pay when casting the spell. So if you kicked it, it'd be 1 white and a black. When Benelish Sleeper enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, each player sacrifices a creature. I actually like this card for limited. I think it's pretty good. When it enters the battlefield and you kick it, you're able to this card actually might be the card you sacrifice, but it might free up a hole in your opponent's defenses, allowing you to get through with an attack that could lead to the win. It's pretty good. It also can really help with if you're playing a sacrifice deck that relies on death triggers. This would be an excellent card for that. So in limited, it definitely has some good synergy for that. So I think I'm going to probably give this a mid rating. Kind of like it for limited with that. It seems pretty decent. I would definitely have it in my deck if I was playing it in a limited deck. For constructed, very similar. It's a good 2-drop, but most of the time you're going to play it with its kicker ability. Also the same thing. Creatures are going to be pretty efficient in constructed, and every once in a while you sneak one of these into your deck, you're able to kind of get rid of one of your opponent's best creatures. Think of it this way: if your opponent just plays a Titan of Industry from New Capenna, and they don't have a Rhino token, and you just have one creature, this being the creature that you kicked, they end up having to sacrifice that Titan, and you're willing to trade this for that, so saves you from getting smashed. So I think it's serviceable. I'd probably give it a mid rating for constructed. Kind of a good card, and like I said, it goes really good in the sacrifice deck archetype. So interesting card. We'll see how it goes. Pretty decent. So the next card is Captain's Call. The sorcery, 3 and a white. Create 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. I think if you're playing a token deck, pretty decent. Let's see. It's too bad it's a sorcery though. It's a little slow. But you know, you're going wide and you need to get around your opponent. 3 tokens might be good. Hard to say. With it at 3 mana. I'm sorry, 3 and a white. Hard to say how this can play out in limited. I think for now I'll probably just give it a mid rating. That might be kind of generous, but it's hard to say. We'll have to see it in action. If I was drafting it, and it became available to me in the 4 slot, I might actually take it over a clunky creature, just due to the fact that there's always the possibility of being able to use your tokens to enlist with your other creatures, or pump them up with other combat tricks. So I think I'll give it a mid for limited. For constructed, I'm going to give it a low rating, just due to the fact there are better token generators out there. Still fairly decent, but at sorcery speed for common, for mana value, I think there are better options, but you never know. It does create soldier tokens, so it could go good in a tribal deck, but like I said, there are so many other options out there that are available that could be better. So give it the low rating on constructed there. Next up is Charismatic Vanguard. It's a creature dwarf soldier for 2 and a white. It's a 3/2 power and toughness. It's got a activated ability of 4 and a white, which gives creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Not bad. It's definitely a body. It's a good 3-drop body. Its activated ability is a little expensive. That might be good as a nice topper at the top of your mana curve. But it's hard to say. I know in draft you're going to be doing a lot, so very rarely are you going to be able to have 5 mana sitting around unless it's really late in the game. For that purpose, I think I'm going to go ahead and give this a low rating for limited. It'd be on the higher end of the low rating, but I just think it's very rarely you're going to be able to activate the ability more than once each turn, unless it's very late in the game. But it's definitely something I would have in my deck as a placeholder if I'm playing an aggressive deck. So for constructed, I still also got to give that a low rating. It's a dwarf soldier. Once again, in constructed, there's just so many options to choose from. You know, might be something that goes good in a tribal deck once again, but as a dwarf or a soldier. But could be useful in a token deck. You can use it to pump up your tokens, but constructed is so refined and so fast that sometimes you just don't get a chance to do it. So all the time. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave it at the low rating. It's definitely a slot filler, but probably have other items that would be able to use in its place if they were available. So next up is Citizen's Arrest. It's an enchantment, 1 and 2 white. When Citizen's Arrest enters the battlefield, exile target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls until Citizen's Arrest leaves the battlefield. For a common, I think this is a great card. The fact that it's efficient, relatively low-costed creature removal that can take out a creature or a planeswalker. I think that's pretty good. There used to be the days where something like this would be 5 or more to cast, but they're getting more and more power creep at the common level for creature removal, and this is a welcome addition to that. So anytime I would see this card in a draft or sealed deck, and I'm playing white, these are going in there, as many as I can get. So I'm definitely going to give this a high rating for limited. For constructed, I actually think I would give this a high rating as well. It's just so efficient, even at the common rarity. But in constructed, you can use any of the good removal you can to take out your opponent's creatures. And sometimes they get so big and beefy that damage-related removal just doesn't help, but this thing just takes them out. Also, same thing with the planeswalker. You know, if you can't get past your opponent's creatures to kill their planeswalker, this is an excellent alternative just to exile it. And if they don't have enchantment removal, it's bye-bye to that permanent. So I definitely like the card. Definitely give it a high rating all across the board. Good card. Definitely like it. Next card is Clockwork Drawbridge. It's a artifact creature wall for 1 white. Defender. You can pay 2 and a white to tap target creature, and it's a 0/3 for power and toughness. Not bad. I think it's a slot filler for limited and constructed. I think I'm going to give it a low rating for both. I know there are better options, probably have better options at the 1 slot. However, it just really depends on what kind of removal there is in this format. As we saw, white has some pretty good stuff. So with that enchantment, it removes creatures and planeswalkers. For 2 colorless and a white to tap target creature, the days used to be where that ability would just be to tap or just to pay 1 white and tap. So it's a little costly, but it could be a good filler card. Looks like there is a defender tribal archetype in Dominaria United, so it might be worth slotting in that deck. So it's not completely on the low end, but overall, I think it's like that. Same thing for constructed. It's got to be pretty specialized to have this in the deck, and it does go real well with the defender style deck, or decks that have creatures deal damage equal to the toughness instead of power. So something to consider, but low for both of them. So next card is Destroy Evil. It's an instant for 1 and 1 white. Choose one. Destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater, or destroy target enchantment. For a common, yeah, I like this. It's pretty good. It's got a couple situations where it's pretty strong. Most of the time I've found, unless your opponent's playing a really low to the ground deck, they're going to at least have 1 creature with 4 toughness. And sometimes with combat tricks, they'll hit that. So I'd probably have one of these to start in the main deck for limited. And I would definitely probably definitely have this in a sideboard for construct. And of course, it also destroys an enchantment. So pretty cool modular card. Definitely has some utility to it. So I think I'll give it a mid rating for limited. For constructed, I think it is situational. It does have removal, but it's probably something I would have in the sideboard. I think I'm going to go ahead and give it a low rating overall. Not that it's bad, it's just that the situation for its modular modes are, they are highly specific. So it's definitely something you want to have in case you come across those scenarios, but it's not something you want to have all the time. So I'll give it a low, maybe one copy in the main deck or in the sideboard, but I probably wouldn't go beyond that. But yeah, it's definitely a decent card. Okay, so we have the next card is Griffin Protector. It's a creature Griffin for 3 and a white, 2/3 flyer. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Griffin Protector gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Turns out this is actually a reprint from M13 originally. I think it most recently appeared in M19 or M20, one of the core sets, but not a bad card. I had to think about this one. I kept going back and forth on the rating for this, but I don't think it would be a high pick in the draft, but it's definitely something I would probably want to put in my deck. It does have evasion, and it could be a finisher in limited. So you get cast a couple creatures late in the game, gives it a couple pumps, and you could go over the top. Because of that, I think I'm going to go ahead and give this a mid rating, but it's at the low end of the mid scale. Just due to the fact of because of its evasion ability, I think that's kind of what puts it up there. Otherwise, I'd probably give it a low rating. For constructed, I'm going to go ahead and give it a low rating. There are just better options in the 4 mana drop slot. Might go okay in a commander tribal deck, but overall, it's just a flyer, 2/3 flyer body for 4 mana. And they have printed better versions. So, but it is what it is. It's a pawn in the deck. So, see how it plays out. Next up is Heroic Charge. It's an instant for 2 and 2 white. Has a kicker of 1 and 1 red. Creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. If the spell was kicked, those creatures also gain trample until end of turn. We've seen a lot of these cards in white in previous years, previous sets that can pump your force for a similar mana value cost. This just tacks on the kicker ability that gives your creatures trample. It's situational. If you don't have any creatures on the board and you draw this, it's a dead card in your hand. But if you're at parity or ahead on the board, this could be a good finisher for you. Yeah. I think because of that, I kind of struggled with this rating, but because of its situational stuff and its mana value, I think I'm going to go ahead and just give it a low rating. Like I said, we've seen a lot of these cards before, and they're situational, so you got to be careful with that. But like I said, if you're at parity or you're ahead in the game and you're able to attack with a force, this could end the game for you, giving you the win. For constructed, I think I'll also give it a low rating. Same deal. You can actually construct your deck where you could capitalize on this card a little easier, but still situational though. If you're coming off of a board wipe that your opponent cast and this is the next card you draw, it's kind of tough for you. Ends up being a dead card in your hand. So yeah, I think I'll go ahead and stick with the low rating on both limited and constructed for it. Next up is another creature, Juniper Order Rootweaver for 1 and a white. Creature, human druid. It's a 2/2, power and toughness. Has a kicker cost of 1 green. When Juniper Order Rootweaver enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Interesting card. I mean, we've seen a lot of the cards like this. Usually they're in green, that when that creature ETBs, it puts a +1/+1 counter on a creature. This one, in order to get that effect, you have to pay the kicker cost. It does have a higher power and toughness. Usually those creatures in green are 1/1s. So this one's a little stronger for a 2-drop. I think, gosh, this could be a really good card, but it could also just be average. I tend to look on the more positive side for some things. So for limited, I think I'm going to give it a mid rating, but it's the very low end of the mid. If it was a 1/1 for this, and then it had the kicker cost, I'd probably put it as a low rating, but you never know. You could be able to put it on the counter on something and makes it something a little better that helps out in combat or combat tricks, or something that helps you avoid getting taken out by any kind of removal or something like that. I know black has some removal that's determined how efficient it is based on power and toughness, so you never know. Hard to say, but I think we'll leave it like that for limited. For constructed, I'm going to go ahead and give it a low rating. The 2-drop slot, there's just a lot of things that are better. Might be kind of decent in a human commander deck, but beyond that, for Selesnya, I think that's about it. Just a good pawn creature for whatever type of deck you're building, but it does have a limited range in constructed. Next up, we have Mesa Cavalier. It is a human knight for 2 and a white. It's a 2/1 flying. When Mesa Cavalier enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. Got good evasion, life gain. I think I like this as a mid rating for limited. It's actually because of its evasion ability and the life gain, that actually can make a difference late in the game. I played a lot of limited games before where both opponents are low on life. The next few turns could determine the game, and getting this on the battlefield with an evasion creature and the life gain is definitely something that could make a difference. So I kind of like that for limited at the mid-range range. For constructed, I'm going to go ahead and give it the low. It's 3 mana cost, 2/1 flying. In constructed, they're just more efficient creatures. So it's a good human knight, good body, but beyond that, I don't see it being much more than something that you slot in if you don't have anything better. Next up is Samite Herbalist. It is a creature for 1 and a white. It's a 2/1. Whenever Samite Herbalist becomes tapped, you gain 1 life and scry 1. This card actually has some nice synergy with the enlist abilities. You can just pile on with the enlist, pile on the Samite Herbalist power onto an enlist creature, then you'll gain life and scry 1. So there's some nice synergy in that area. It's also just a good 2-drop for getting some early interaction in the game. I think because of this for limited, I'm going to go ahead and give it a mid rating, and it just has some sneaky good synergy with enlist, aside from just being able to attack on its own to trigger its ability. So kind of like it. I think I'll go with that. For constructed, I will give it a low end rating, just due to the fact that once we hit the 2 mana drop spell or 2 mana value slot, there are just a lot of options to choose from. It's common and it serves a limited purpose, but yeah, for constructed, there's just seems to be a lot more options available. But I like it for mid, probably more than constructed. So next up, we have Stall for Time. It's an instant for 2 and a white. Has a kicker of 1 and a blue. Tap up to 2 target creatures. If this spell was kicked, put a stun counter on each of those creatures. Draw a card. I definitely like this. You get the draw spell, a draw card ability, regardless if you kicked it or not, and taps 2 target creatures. So that's really good for moving creatures out of the way so you can attack, or slowing your opponents down if they wanted to attack you. You cast this before they declare who attacks. Then if you kick it, you put in stun counters on those creatures. So they don't untap during the next opponent's untap steps, as long as they have a stun counter on them. So that's pretty good. I think I'm going to give this a... I like it. I think it's sneaky good. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. If you're playing blue-white, like blue-white flyers, or maybe blue-white something like that, it's just a card that keeps your hand filled up by drawing a card, delays your opponent's attacks, and it can actually really slow them down if you pay for the stun counters. For constructed, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give it a mid rating for constructed. That might be a little generous, but just due to the fact of what's available in the 3 mana slot for constructed. But you never know. For a blue-white control deck, you might just slot one of these into your deck. It is a cantrip, so it lets you get cards. It replaces itself, so hard to say, but it definitely has its uses. And the fact that it's instant speed is even better, so we'll see how it plays out. But pretty decent card overall. I definitely like it. Good card. So I think this is our last common. Take Up the Shield. It's an instant for 1 and a white. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains lifelink and indestructible until end of turn. Yeah, this is a pretty cool card. Really efficient. This is a card I could see being played both in limited and constructed. I'm going to give it a high rating for both. The fact that it puts a +1/+1 counter on a creature, and it gains lifelink and indestructible. That can be a big game swinger in both games. Kind of reminds me a little bit of there was a card from Khans of Tarkir that was similar, that gave a creature a +1/+1 counter and a protection from a color. And it's driving me nuts because that's what I want to compare it to. And Feat of Resistance, that's what it was. Pretty close to that. Feat of Resistance put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, and it gained protection until the end of the turn, but it didn't give him lifelink. So this is actually a better card, I think. Definitely something I could see used in constructed and limited to protect your creatures, give yourself lifelink, and pump their power and toughness. I know there's been many times in constructed where I've needed to save my creatures, and this card would have been fantastic to have. So definitely a good card. Good way to end the common category for our white set review. So next up, we're hitting the uncommons now. We've got Cleaving Skyrider. It's a creature, human warrior for 2 and a white. It's a 2/2 flash flying, and it has a kicker of 2 and 1 red. When Cleaving Skyrider enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, it deals X damage to any target, where X is the number of attacking creatures. I actually kind of like this card. I think this is a really good card for, well, just for 3, you can flash it in to do a surprise block, or flash it in at the end of your opponent's turn to be able to attack with it on your upcoming turn. But if you're able to kick it, this is fantastic for both offense and defense. On the offensive scenario, you can flash it in and have it deal damage to something that could block. So you just it deals X damage equal to the number of attacking creatures you control. Another way is on the defensive side, is if your opponents come in, let's say they're attacking with 5 creatures, you flash this in and you pay with the kicker cost, and it deals 5 damage to a creature, because it's X is the number of attacking creatures. It doesn't say if it's yours or your opponent. So it's kind of a sneaky defensive card. And so you take out your opponent creature with that damage, and then you block with this, and maybe get a trade, and that kind of blunts the attack on you. So definitely a good card. It's got evasion, flash. Yeah, it's pretty decent. I'm actually going to give this a high rating for limited. It's definitely something I would draft if I saw it, and I'm drafting white. I would definitely pick this up. So, and for constructed, actually, sorry, I'd probably give it a mid rating. In constructed, you know, there's always a competition for slots, so this comes close to a high rating, but not quite. But maybe a slot for one copy of it and all. But definitely a useful card. Definitely like it because of its ability. It just seems pretty versatile for both attacking offense and playing defense if you have to. So pretty decent. Next uncommon is Coalition Sky Knight. It's a creature human knight for 3 and a white with a 2/2 power and toughness. It's got flying and enlist. So with enlist, like I said, it's kind of tough to say how things are going to go with enlist. It's got really cool evasion. You enlist a bunch of creatures onto it and you attack. You're able to get past your opponent's defenses and you deal a bunch of damage. But on the back side of that, or I'm sorry, on the bad side of that, you do that same scenario. Your opponent has a removal spell, knocks this off the board. You end up wasting all those enlist powers that you piled onto the Sky Knight. So double-edged sword there, kind of tough to say. So I think for now, because it had with its evasion ability, I'm just gonna go ahead and give it a mid rating. If it didn't have evasion with flying, I would give it a low rating, but we'll see how it goes. But for now, I think that's a decent slot for it. For constructed, I'll give it a low rating, just due to the fact that it's just so much better removal in constructed, and you go ahead and attack with this. I don't think you'll be able to land damage on your opponent. So because of that, and due to its mana value cost, I think probably just keep it at the low slot. Something you might be able to put in a commander deck, but I don't see anything beyond that. Next uncommon is Join Forces. It's a 2 and a white for an instant. Untap up to 2 target creatures. They each get +2/+2 until end of turn. I want to say this is a reprint. No, actually, surprisingly, it seems so familiar, but surprisingly, it's actually first printing for this card. So untap up to 2 target creatures. They each get +2/+2 on a turn. Not bad, not bad. It's a good ambush card for your opponents to take out your opponent's creatures. Definitely a combat trick I'd probably put in if I was playing white. I'm gonna give it a mid rating for limited. It's situational, but so I think I'm going to give it a low rating in constructed, just due to the fact that there are other things that you might want to put in the constructed slot. But it definitely has its uses. It's a good ambush card, so it's can definitely do some damage and mess up your opponent's strategy and do some damage that way. So. Knight of Dawn's Light. It's a creature, human knight for 1 and a white. It's a 2/2 first strike. If you would gain life, gain that much life +1 instead. That's pretty good. And then for 1 and a white, Knight of Dawn's Light gets +1/+1 until end of turn. It's actually a pretty cool card. Kind of reminds me of the old Order of Lit Beer from Fallen Empires, or as a pump knight. And it also has that life gain ability +1. Kind of taking a little bit of something from the cleric class that's rotating out from Adventures of the Forgotten Realm. Pretty cool, and it's a first striker, so definitely like this card. If you're playing heavy white or mono white and limited, this could be a house. I think I'm going to give it a rating of high for limited. It's definitely an efficient creature, something you can use early, use late, and use mid. and you're able to alter its power and toughness. So you're able to save it, could be able to save it from damage related removal, or mess up your opponent's removal spells if those are dependent on power and toughness levels. So definitely a good card. I'm going to give it a mid rating for constructed. It's definitely a card that I would put in a human commander deck, and actually I might even put this in a standard deck too, just due to the fact that it's so efficient with what it does. So I like it. It's definitely a card that is lean and mean and ready for some fighting. So pretty good 2-drop. Next up is Love Song of Night and Day. This is the first saga we've seen. Sagas this time in Dominaria United have a new ability with them called Read Ahead. It says choose a chapter and start with that many lore counters. Add one after your draw step. Skipped chapters don't trigger. Sacrifice after 3. So basically that means if you were to start on chapter 2, you'd put 2 lore counters on it. Since you skipped chapter 1, you wouldn't get any of the chapter 1 abilities. You would just do chapter 2 and move forward from there. So the card for chapter 1, it says you and target opponent each draw 2 cards. For chapter 2, create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. Chapter 3, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. I like chapter 2 and chapter 3. Chapter 1 I'm not so big on. I could see that being kind of decent constructed commander, but I think probably most of the time I'm probably going to read ahead to chapter 2 and chapter 3. I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. It's definitely something I would put in the deck because you're going to get a 1/1 flyer, and then next turn you're going to be able to put +1/+1 counters on up to 2 target creatures. So that could be pretty good. For constructed, I think I'm going to give that a mid rating as well. In Commander, I could definitely see this being pretty cool. You're playing a 4-player game, and let's say you have one player that's beating up on everybody, and you and your opponents need to help each other out to beat them. I could see you and choosing one of your other opponents both draw 2 cards, and you get the benefits from that. And then of course you have chapter 2 and chapter 3 to help you out there the rest of the way. So probably a mid rating for constructed. Who knows? Could go well in a enchantment themed deck and help you out there. So we'll see how it goes. Cool flavor though. Really like the card. Love the flavor for it. Next up is Phyrexian Missionary. Another uncommon. It's 1 and a white. Creature, Phyrexian Human Cleric. It's got lifelink. Has a kicker of 1 and a black. And when a Phyrexian Missionary enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Oh, I also failed to mention it's a 2/3 power and toughness. That's pretty good for a 2-drop. 2/3 just by itself with lifelink. Yeah, that's pretty strong. And the fact that you're able to pay 1 and a black to return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, that's even better. I definitely like this card. I'm gonna give it a high rating for limited. Not something I would first pick, but well, actually I might. Who knows? But it's definitely a card that if I saw being passed around and I'm in white or white-black, I'd definitely pick it up. And it's definitely got a bunch of utility to it. Excellent body, excellent ability and lifelink, and the fact that it has a raised dead built into it. Pretty good. I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for constructed. It fits the human and cleric archetype. Clerics seem to gain a life a lot, and there really seems to be some synergy with the life gain stuff. So I like the card. Really efficient creature at the uncommon slot. So something I would definitely put in a commander or brawl deck. Maybe standard deck if there's a cleric or human archetype, but definitely something I consider. Definitely a useful card. Has a lot of utility to it. Next up is Prayer of Binding. It's got it's an enchantment for 3 and a white. It's got flash. Whenever Prayer of Binding enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent an opponent controls. Until Prayer of Binding leaves the battlefield, you gain 2 life. It's an interesting card. At first seeing this card, it kind of reminded me of Cast Out from Amonkhet. The only thing is Cast Out from Amonkhet lets you cycle a card. This one has you gain 2 life. But with that 2 life and flash ability, it ends up reminding me of Vraska's Contempt from Ixalan, which is a black card, but and that was also had a 4 mana value. So definitely a useful card. The fact that it takes out a non-land permanent. In limited, I think this is a fantastic card. It flashes in and removes a permanent, and you gain 2 life. I'll give it a high rating there. For constructed, these type of cards, these blink exile cards that blink things out until it leaves the battlefield, they seem to be making them at a lower mana value. So the Force 4 is a little more expensive, but it does have flash. It is pretty decent, but I think I'm going to give it a mid constructed rating. I really want to give it a high rating, but for now I'll just give it mid. We'll see how it plays out. Maybe later on I might want to change that to high, but it's an effective card. I think the only thing that's keeping it from getting the high rating is its mana value at 4. But other than that, definitely playable. Definitely an option to look at for using removal against your opponents. So good card. Love the flavor for it. Definitely efficient. Next up is Resolute Reinforcements. Creature Human Soldier for 1 and a white. It's a 1/1 flash. When Resolute Reinforcements enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Reminds me a lot of Raise the Alarm, I believe. Let's see, that's the instant from Sets of Old that lets you put 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens into play. So it's very similar, but this is an actual creature, has an actual body. So if it was blinked out, it would come back and create another creature token. Because of that, I think I would go ahead and I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited, and I think I'd do the same for constructed. A lot of situational stuff you could do with this card. Like I said, you can blink it and have it come back into play and make more tokens. The fact that it has flash, that's useful. You're able to ambush your opponents or play it at the end of their turns, so you can attack with it right away on your upcoming turn. So pretty good. I definitely like it. A lot of uses for this card. Runic Shot. It's a sorcery for 1 white. Has a kicker of 1 blue. Destroy target tapped creature. If this spell was kicked, scry 2. Yeah, I like this card. It's for just 1 white, it can destroy a tapped creature, and if it was kicked, you get the scry. Pretty decent. I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. Same thing for constructed. Definitely has its uses, and because it's low mana value and low kicker cost, it's definitely something I would consider putting in both decks. I think I would be using it more in limited than I would in constructed, but definitely something that has its utility in constructed as well. I'd probably almost definitely put it in commander. So I like the card. Good flavor for it. Next up is Shalia's Acolyte. It's a creature angel for 4 and a white. It's a 3/4 body with flying. If Shalia's Acolyte was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it. So if you kicked it, it would be 5, a white and a green. That gets pretty expensive, so that's 7 total mana, and it would be a 5/6. Could be a good finisher. I think because of that, I'll give it a mid rating for limited. It's probably something I'd use at the top of my mana curve for a limited deck. And definitely use it to finish off my opponents if I'm able to. For constructed, I think I'm going to go ahead and give it low. I think for that kind of mana, it's a little slow. Go pretty decent in a commander deck for an angel tribal, or for flying or something like that, or a +1/+1 counter deck. I would definitely use it, but just due to the fact of the cost of its mana value plus its kicker, it could slow things down a bit. But decent card, but low for constructed, mid-range for limited. So I think this is our last uncommon here. We have Wingmantle Chaplain. It's a creature human cleric for 3 and a white. It's an 0/3 defender. When Wingmantle Chaplain enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying for each creature with defender you control. And whenever another creature with defender enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. So obviously you can see that this is tilted towards the defender tribal mechanic. This could actually be a pretty crazy bomb if you cast this and you have a bunch of defenders on the battlefield. Let's say you have five defenders on the battlefield and you throw this out there, create 5 1/1 white bird creature tokens. That could get pretty crazy. And then each defender you cast that comes into play, you can create another bird creature token. Pretty nuts. Aside from that, though, I think it's kind of limited. I think for limited, I'll give it a mid rating, just due to the fact that it's so focused on the defender mechanic, the tribal mechanic, that it does have its narrow use. Same thing for constructed. I think because of that, for constructed, I think I'm going to be a little generous and give it mid rating for constructed, because you can do I've seen some crazy defender decks, and this will just add to it and make them even more powerful, especially in Commander. But anything outside of the defender archetypes, don't really see it doing much. So I would put it at the low end of the mid range, but it's a cool card, definitely cool flavor. Could be a bomb if you have a bunch of defenders already on the battlefield. So we're on to the rare cards now. Anointed Peacekeeper. For 2 and a white, it's a creature human cleric for 3/3 power and toughness. Vigilance. As Anointed Peacekeeper enters the battlefield, look at an opponent's hand, then choose any card name. Spells your opponents cast with the chosen name cost 2 more to cast. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name cost 2 more to activate unless they're mana abilities. This is a really cool card. This is like Elite Spellbinder and Sorcerer's Spyglass merged into a single card. Really cool. Neat thing about it is you look at your opponent's hand and then choose any card name. It doesn't say you have to choose a card name in your opponent's hand. So theoretically, you could look at their hand and then say choose Meathook Massacre, which isn't in their hand, and they'd still have to pay 2 more to cast it. Or choose a Planeswalker, and they'd have to pay 2 more to activate the loyalty abilities. I think I'm going to go ahead and give it, for limited, I think for limited, I'm going to give it a high rating. You're not going to see many limited decks where they're going to have 4 or 5, or 3 or 4, or actually limited 5 copies of a card, since you can actually have more than 4 in a limited deck. Because of that, it's still really awesome, still really efficient. You can use it to really tax your opponent card that is giving you a hard time. But it's definitely has its usefulness. Plus, it's got a good body at 3/3 and vigilance. But it's definitely useful for shutting down your opponent's strategies. So we're gonna give it, for constructed, we're gonna give our first epic ranking. I love this card for constructed. Same mana value as Elite Spellbinder that's rotating from Strixhaven, but this seems more oppressive. Just due to the fact that you can name any card, it doesn't have to be in their hand, and it's all of their cards of that name, so it could be pretty brutal, pretty oppressive. So yeah, I definitely like it at the epic rank. It's definitely something that will be useful to use against your opponents. I could definitely see it in, being pretty useful in a mono white deck or something like that, some kind of aggressive deck that taxes your opponents. Next up is Archangel of Wrath. It's a creature angel for 2 and 2 white. Has a kicker cost of black and or red. Flying lifelink. Whenever Archangel of Wrath enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, it deals 2 damage to any target. When Archangel of Wrath enters the battlefield, if it was kicked twice, it deals 2 damage to any target. Then it's a 3/4. So basically, you could actually, if you're able to kick it twice, it could deal 4 damage to any target. And actually, you could probably do it. Yeah, you could do it to 2 different targets or 1 single target. The fact that it has lifelink is you're going to gain life from those kicked triggers as well. So that's pretty good. That could actually be a bomb in limited. I think we're going to have our first epic limited rating as well. The fact that you can take out multiple creatures or take out 1 big creature, gain life from it, fly over and attack and deal damage, or you can just do 4 to the face. Pretty solid. Good card overall. Definitely a workhorse with the evasion ability. I like it a lot. For constructed, I'm going to give it a high rating. It's in the 4 mana slot. Definitely a serviceable card. And it can actually be a good finisher in constructed with its kicker abilities. So definitely a card to take seriously, and the fact that it also lets you have lifelink as well, and its evasion, pretty solid. So I think I'll do the high rating for constructed for it. Next rare is Danitha, Benalia's Hope, for 4 and a white. It's a legendary creature, human knight, 4/4 power and toughness. First strike, vigilance, lifelink. When Danitha, Benalia's Hope enters the battlefield, you may put an aura or equipment card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield attached to Danitha. So I haven't seen a lot of auras or equipment cards in Dominaria United, so that ability is not necessarily going to be much of a factor in limited. However, it is still a house. For 5 mana, you get a first strike vigilance lifelink creature. That's pretty strong. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. I probably could go epic, but I think it's probably closer to a high rating. It's on the high end of the high rating, just due to the fact that it's a very efficient creature, just getting down to business and smashing face, gaining life, and doesn't tap to attack. So pretty strong. Same thing for constructed. It's a really good card to have in your constructed deck. I could see it being a house in Commander. Heck, I could even see it being one of the generals built around a aura / equipment deck. Definitely really strong ability with that. So really efficient creature at 5 mana. I like it at the high rating. Next up is Defiler of Faith. We get to see our first Defiler for the set. These are pretty cool, crazy cards for every color. It's a creature, Phyrexian human, for 3 and 2 white, 5/5 power and toughness with vigilance. As an additional cost to cast white permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost 1 white less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of white mana you pay. When you cast a white permanent spell, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. This is pretty cool. This is more or less a pseudo, gives your white permanent spells a pseudo Phyrexian mana ability, so you can end up paying life instead of their mana value or mana cost. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty good at 5/5 vigilance. So if you have a let's say you have a creature that's say 3 white and 3 colorless, you can just pay 6 life and pay 3 mana to get it out, and hopefully it's a big creature you can smash away with that. So it's pretty good. I like that. For limited, I'm going to give it a high rating. There's a lot of things you could do about it. You could build around it pretty well. Pump out a bunch of creatures if you're playing a lot of permanents. So definitely a card that could be a menace for your opponent. I'm also going to give it a high rating for constructed. Like I said, this is a card you could build around. If you got a lot of life gain in your deck, let's say you're playing a cleric deck with a lot of life gain, it's going to be no problem for you to throw this out for its mana value and just start casting stuff for cheap. So plus you get the token as an additional generator. So and it's vigilance, doesn't have to tap to attack. So strong card. I like it. Love the flavor behind it. I think this will be a house in Commander, and it could have its places in Standard as well. Pretty decent card. So next up is Guardian of New Benalia. It's a creature human soldier for 1 and a white, 2/2 power and toughness. It's got enlist. Whenever Guardian of New Benalia enlists a creature, scry 2. Discard a card. Guardian of Benalia gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. This is actually the first enlist card I ever saw. Kind of interesting. If you're attacking with it and you've got it enlisted and it's got all this huge power, you can discard a card to make it indestructible. And since you've already attacked with it, it doesn't matter that it's tapped. And then you get to scry each time it enlists. So let's say you enlist it with 3 creatures, you get to scry 2 3 times. Pretty interesting card. I think it could find its way into some constructed decks. Pretty decent for limited as well. I definitely like it. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a high rating for limited. For constructed, it's hard to say yet still. I think I'll be generous and give it a high rating as well for constructed. This card could see its way into a lot of aggro decks. It could also I could see a slot for it in Commander as well. So, but like I said, it's going to really be determined by how well the enlist ability plays out when we're playing in the format. So, something maybe to revisit later. But that's where I think I'll rate it for those two. Next up is Leyline Binding for 5 and a white. It's an enchantment with flash. It has domain. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each basic land type among lands you control. When Leyline Binding enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent component controls till Leyline Binding leaves the battlefield. I'm going to give this, I really like it. I'm going to give it an epic rating for limited, and I think I'll give it a high rating for constructed, just due to the fact that in the Dominaria United, it looks like they really want to bring domain back and make it a strong mechanic. They have some ways to get domain a lot easier than you could in previous sets. So and the fact that it has flash, I think a lot of the times if you build it around your deck just right, you could cast it for just 1 white. That's pretty powerful for a removal spell for 1 white that can take out any non-land permanent. But even if you're just doing a 2-color deck, what is that? You'd be casting it for 4, so it'd become like more like some of your other enchantment removal spells. But if you're playing 3 colors or more, it gets even better and better. So, and this set looks like there's a lot of fixing in it where you'll be able to cast it for just 1 most of the time. Next up is Temporary Lockdown. Another enchantment for 1 and 2 white. When Temporary Lockdown enters the battlefield, exile each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less until Temporary Lockdown leaves the battlefield. Well, there's your aggro smasher. This will really mess up mono white or Boros aggro or any kind of low to the ground aggro deck. It's going to take out most of the creatures on the battlefield, and of course it just wipes out all of the tokens. So I can see this in a control deck quite a bit. I could see it as it's definitely a sideboard card. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited, because a lot of the times in limited you're going to see a wide range of mana values on the battlefield, so it's going to hit some things and miss the other. For constructed, I think I'm going to give it a mid rating as well. You might be able to in a build around, I would probably give it a high rating, but for now, I think it's just mid because it is so selective. It's a card oftentimes you're going to see in the sideboard, but once you bring it in to the main board and your opponent's playing a lot of low mana creatures, aggro deck, this pretty much just stops them in their tracks. So good card to use when facing that scenario. So yeah, we'll go mid for both of those. Next up is Urza Assembles the Titans. It's Saga, has read ahead for a 3 and 2 white. It says scry 4 for chapter 1. Then you may reveal the top card of your library. If a Planeswalker card is revealed this way, put it into your hand. For chapter 2, you may put a Planeswalker card with mana value 6 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. Really, through all the history of all the planeswalkers out there, that pretty much is all the planeswalkers, the exception of maybe like Valky or Tibalt, I'm sorry. But not many planeswalkers are mana value 7 or more, so this will let you do almost all of them. And the third chapter is you may activate the loyalty abilities of planeswalkers you control twice this turn, rather than only once. Interesting, pretty good. That might actually get you up to making multiple card draws, multiple tokens, or maybe even get you a chance to go ultimate and get an emblem ability with your planeswalker. So pretty decent card. Definitely planeswalker centric. I think for limited, it is limited in that sense that it revolves around planeswalkers. So for limited, I'm going to give it a low rating. It's not something you're going to see used that often in the limited decks. But that being said, I'll give it a high rating in constructed, because if you're playing planeswalkers in constructed, oftentimes you'll be able to use this ability and take advantage of all your planeswalker loyalty activations. So decent card. Love the flavor behind it. If you've read any of the stories, this definitely fits into what went on during the invasion block. So all those years ago. Pretty cool card, flavor-wise. Next up is Valiant Veteran. It's a creature core soldier for 1 and a white, 2/2 power and toughness. Other soldiers you control get +1/+1. Pay 3 and 2 white. Exile Valiant Veteran from your graveyard. Put a +1/+1 counter on each soldier you control. Yeah, this is a pretty cool card. Definitely fits in with a lot of the soldiers that are in this set, plus any other soldiers that you have that might be playing in constructed. Goes really well with the soldier tokens that you can generate from this set. So pretty cool. Also the fact that you can exile it from your graveyard to put counters on your creatures. And it looks like you can play it as an instant ability. So nice surprise attack against your surprise pump for your creatures against your opponents there. Pretty decent. For limited, gosh, you're going to be having drafting a lot of soldiers in order for this to really work. But it could, just depends on how many you're able to get. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited, just due to the fact that it's so specific, so soldier specific for it. I think each color has a new lord for each color, for each tribal or different creature type. So something to take into consideration when you're drafting it or building a sealed deck. For constructed, as a tribal lord, I'm going to give it a high rating. I like it, like what it does. If you're building a soldier deck or something like that, it will definitely boost up your team. And the fact that you're able to use its activated ability from the graveyard to pump your force, that's pretty good. Could be used to finish off your opponents late in the game if you're going for an alpha strike, or an alpha strike that they really don't know about. So that's pretty good. So we're on to the mythic rares. This is the only mythic rares for white. So last card for this video. Sarah Paragon. It's a creature angel for 2 and 2 white, 3/4 flying. 3/4 power and toughness flying. Once during each of your turns, you may play land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. If you do, it gains whenever this permanent is put into a graveyard from the battlefield. Exile it, and you gain 2 life. Yeah, this is pretty cool. Really cool mythic. It's kind of like a something that lets you stick around in the late game against your opponents if you're playing an aggro deck. Keep bringing your creatures back. You can actually construct a limited deck where you kind of keep track and make sure all your creatures have mana value 3 or less. Just keep bringing them back until you've used them twice. And for constructed, pretty good. I could see this going really well in a mono white deck, or maybe even the Boros aggro for standard, or just any kind of aggro deck that has a lot of creatures, small creatures that you can use, and keep bringing them back with this angel. So for limited, I'm going to give this it is mythic. I think it's worthy of an epic rating. Just the fact that it's so versatile. Plus, you get the life gain and the evasion. That could be the difference in the game. I'm going to give it a high rating for constructed. It's borderline high rating, borderline epic rating, just because of what it does. But yeah, it definitely could find its way into several constructed decks. Pretty strong. And I could see this being played in a lot of different constructed formats. Probably could be pretty amazing in Commander as well. So pretty decent card. Definitely worthy of its rating. So that is it for white. Next up, we're going to be hitting blue. So stay tuned. I'm going to have blue available for you pretty quick here as we continue our trek through Dominaria United set review for limited constructed. We'll see you pretty shortly there, everybody. Have a good one.